Okay, let's dive in. We're unpacking something pretty crucial if you're looking to get practical, hands-on with web application security.
hmm
We're focusing today on a tool called WebGoat. And this whole deep dive gets built right from the source material we have about it.
That's right. And our mission here is pretty straightforward, really. We want to figure out what exactly WebGoat is, why it's seen as such a valuable teaching resource in the security world. And this is absolutely critical, the non-negotiable warnings you have to understand before you even think about firing it up.
Right. So starting at the very beginning then,
Yeah.
what are we actually talking about when we say WebGoat?
Okay, so at its heart, WebGoat is a web application, like any website you might use. But here's the twist, and the material you shared makes this super clear. It's deliberately insecure.
Deliberately.
Yeah, deliberately. It wasn't just, bad coding by mistake. It was built that way. On purpose.
Wow, okay. Deliberately insecure. That kind of flies in the face of everything you'd normally aim for in web development. And it's maintained by OWASP, the Open Web Application Security Project. You'd think they'd be all about secure stuff.
Well, yeah, it seems counterintuitive at first glance, doesn't it? But that's the entire point. The goal, as the source material lays out, is learning. It's all about education. WebGoat is specifically designed to teach web application security lessons. And it does that by demonstrating common server-side application flaws.
Ah, okay. So it's basically a teaching aid, like a simulation environment where
Yeah.
these vulnerabilities are just there on display.
Precisely. The exercises inside it, they're structured so you can learn about application security, about penetration testing techniques by actually doing them.
Right, by practicing.
Exactly. You get to try explaining these things in a controlled setting. It's meant to be a safe place to experiment, but, and this is a big but, only if you follow some really strict rules.
And those rules sound absolutely vital. The warnings in the source material, they seem pretty stark. We should probably hit those head on.
Agreed. Yeah, this is probably the most critical part. Warning number 1, running WebGoat makes your machine extremely vulnerable to attack.
Extremely vulnerable. Okay, that's not like a small risk. That's a fundamental security change. And the immediate action tied to that, according to the material, what do you have to do?
You must disconnect from the internet while you're using this program. Simple as that. Now, the sources do mention that the default setup binds to localhost, which, helps minimize exposure a bit. But the main directive, the one you absolutely cannot skip, is just be offline. Period. Don't use it connected to the public internet.
Got it. Disconnect completely. Wow, that really underlines how vulnerable it makes your system.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the other big warning we need to be clear on?
Warning number 2. This program is strictly for educational purposes only.
Educational purposes only. And the consequences, if you ignore that. The material spells those out too, right?
Oh, it does. It really doesn't pull any punches there. It says, basically, if you try these techniques without explicit authorization on systems that aren't yours, well, you're very likely going to get caught. And the fallout. It's serious. The source specifically says, most companies will fire you.
Well,
Yeah, and it adds, don't even think about saying you were just doing security research. That won't fly. The source notes that's the first thing that all hackers claim, and it just won't work as an excuse.
okay, that's a very clear, very direct message then. Learn, practice, experiment, fine, but only in that specific, safe, disconnected environment. Trying these skills anywhere else is a huge no-no, with serious real-world consequences mentioned right there in the source.
Exactly right. These aren't just friendly suggestions, they're hard requirements for using WebGoat responsibly.
Okay, so with those critical safety and ethical lines drawn very clearly, let's look at the practical side. How do you actually, get this thing running? The material mentions a few different ways. Seems pretty accessible.
Yeah, it's quite flexible, actually. One popular way mentioned is using Docker containers. There's a standard image, and even one that comes with a full Linux desktop if you want, like a whole prepackaged environment.
Right, I saw that. And there was a note about using network proxies, like OS/BuzzOP or burp with Docker.
Good point. Yeah, if you're going to proxy the traffic, to analyze it, which is super common when you're learning this stuff, you can't just point your proxy tool at localhost when using the Docker container. It won't quite work like that. The material advises you'll need to set up custom host entries, something like www.webgoat.local, and then configure the Docker container, probably using environment variables, to bind to those host names. WebWolf, which is another tool often used with WebGoat for certain lessons, needs a similar kind of setup too.
Okay, so maybe a little bit of network config needed there if you're bringing in other tools. What about running it more directly, not using Docker?
Yep, you can run it standalone, just as a JAR file. You just need Java installed, obviously.
Yeah.
Then you download the latest release, JAR, and you run it directly from the command line. Pretty simple.
And for folks who really want to get under the hood or maybe contribute,
Yeah.
you can run it from the source code itself.
Correct, yeah. That's the most involved route. The source says you'll need Java 23, Git, Maven, and an IDE. Basically, you clone the repository from GitHub, build it with Maven, and then run it. It uses Spring Boot, so you'd likely run it via the Spring Boot plugin.
That flexibility is good. And the material also mentioned being able to customize the run, like changing settings.
It did, yeah, using environment variables again. You can change the default ports for WebGoat and WebWolf if you need to. Or, and this is quite useful, you can tell it to exclude certain lesson categories or even specific individual lessons.
Oh, that's handy.
Yeah, it lets you tailor the environment. You can focus just on the vulnerabilities you're interested in learning about right now. Helps structure your learning path.
Makes sense. And speaking of the project itself, the material confirms it's open source, lives on GitHub.
It does indeed, and you get a sense of its popularity and the community involved from the stats mentioned. It lists, let's see, 7.5 thousand stars, 6.8 thousand forks, and over 100 contributors, 111 specifically.
Those are pretty solid numbers.
Hmm.
Definitely shows it's a widely used tool with community backing.
For sure, it's an active project.
And the language breakdown of the code? Anything interesting there?
Yeah, it gives you a little peek at the tech stack. It says the primary languages are JavaScript, about 51.2%, then Java at 32.8%, HTML at 12%, and CSS makes up the rest, around 3.9%.
So heavy on the web front end stuff and Java on the back end. Makes sense for what it is, I suppose.
Exactly. Pretty typical for a modern web application training tool.
So bringing all this back to you, the listener,
Mm-hmm.
why should you actually care about WebGoat? What's the takeaway?
Well, I think because it offers something pretty unique, right? It's a concrete, interactive way to learn about web security vulnerabilities, but from the attacker's perspective.
Yeah.
Getting that hands-on experience, actually trying to find and exploit flaws, that's incredibly valuable for figuring out how to defend against them properly.
Right, it shifts your whole perspective. You're not just reading about theoretical flaws,
Yeah.
you're actually seeing them, doing the attack.
Precisely. But, as we've stressed quite a bit based on this source material, that power, that learning opportunity, it comes with some really significant responsibilities. Those explicit warnings, isolating the environment, disconnecting, sticking strictly to educational use, they aren't optional. They're fundamental.
Absolutely. Well, this deep dive into the material has certainly been enlightening. So just to recap, WebGoat is this intentionally vulnerable web app. It's an OWASP project designed as a hands-on teaching tool. Lets you understand and practice web security pen testing techniques against common server-side flaws. But using it safely means following those crucial safety rules, especially disconnecting from the internet and keeping it strictly educational.
That really covers the core points from the source material, yeah. So here's maybe a final thought for you to chew on, just based on what the material tells us. WebGoat exists, and it's widely used, specifically because it's built around these common server-side flaws, right? So what does the sheer necessity and the prevalence of a tool like this, a tool designed to train people on vulnerabilities found in the wild, what does that imply about the fundamental state of web application security out there in the real world today?